Hey guys, Hawka here, and welcome back to the HLTV Rankings Recap for August the 19th, 2019, featuring a very cute little puppy. It's not too long now until we are done with the player break, so let's go over the rankings one last time before the major begins. Starting over on our left, you can see that, again, very little has changed in the top 10. Liquid remain at number 1, although surprisingly, Vitality actually caught them up in points this week, which sounds a bit strange, but then you realize that Liquid lost quite a few of their results from Pro League in the form category, so that's a lot of their wins gone from form. They're still the best in every single category by such a long way though, so it's not really a big deal. Everyone else stayed in their same position in the top 10 except for Na'Vi overtaking NRG. Again, I think this is just because Na'Vi have some more fresh results. They haven't got any results decaying because they've got such a new roster, whereas NRG are losing some of their old placings over time. So not too much to see here, but it's nice to see Na'Vi back in the top 5. The right side of things is a little more interesting. Heroic move up to 12th place, which is a really impressive achievement for this roster. I did not see them getting anywhere near the top 10 with this lineup. I thought top 20 would be good for them, so to get up to 12th place is very, very impressive, but we've got some more news on them later, making a roster move. And then outside of that, crazy jump over Renegades, Cloud9 and Tricked both gain a place over Optic. Not too much going on in terms of massive changes, but Tricked overtaking Optic puts Tricked as the 4th best Danish team, which is kind of crazy to think about. So that's the actual rankings themselves looked at. Again, there weren't too many games played this week, so there's not much to talk about in terms of results. So let's just jump right into a couple of teams and a couple of news stories. I think the most interesting stuff this week was happening within the Danish scene, with one roster move being made and one free agent now up for grabs. In case you haven't heard, Heroic decided to bench NaToSaphix and they picked up Borup from Tricked. However, this has come into effect after the rankings were put out on Monday, so we're going to see the point changes from this next week. In terms of this move from Heroic's perspective, it seems like a slightly strange one because this team have been causing quite a few upsets recently. They've been consistently rising the rankings, and when you look at the names in this team, 12th place seems like a really good start for this lineup, but they've decided that the roles aren't really working out with NaToSaphix as they brought him in to be that AWPer. Now Esatag has taken over that role, and clearly they just don't think Nato is valuable enough as just a rifler to keep on this team. I still think they could have given this lineup a little bit longer though, considering they have upset wins over teams like Vitality in a best of 3, they've beaten Ents in a best of 1, they've also beat Optic in a best of 3 in that GGBet Chicago Invitational, proving that they are a top Danish side, and then they also beat Fnatic back at the Pro League Finals in a best of 3. So I'd say these results are easily enough to keep this team together for 1 or 2 more LANs and see what happens in the future. But you can also understand that if the roles aren't working out within the team, maybe it is worth bringing someone in who can fill those roles, and Borup is a pretty good choice. Again, the nice thing with Danish teams, especially players that have come up under... As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, the nice thing with Danish teams and Danish players, especially those that have played under Hunden, is that you know that they will be able to play within a system. So I can see Borup doing well with that, and he was never a player that really felt like he demanded his spots on Trick. So I could see this working pretty well within the roster, but it does suck for NaToSaphix to get cut from this team after they were doing so damn well. As for NaToSaphix, it will be interesting to see what options are open to him, because obviously Tricked now have a spot available. They have Acor as their primary AWPer currently, and he is quite a hard AWPer. He doesn't really rifle much, so if Nato wants to go back to AWPing, then the roles in Tricked could be a bit awkward to work out. But if one of Acor or NaToSaphix was willing to rifle and then AWP some of the time, I could see that working. And if there's anyone who would be able to build a team and work out the roles, it would be Hunden. You look back at this tricked team, he slowly brought these players in over time to get this squad where it was to this point. So Hunden would be the guy to figure it out, and you've got to think that's the most obvious option available to NATO. Either way, we'll see where NaToSaphix ends up, we'll see how Heroic do into the future, but definitely expect Heroic to drop down below North in next week's edition of the rankings, and Tricked will probably drop below Optic as well, because they've both lost one of their players that got them their previous points, so that means their overall point tally will diminish a little bit. So now that that is the Danish scene fully covered, it's time to move on to what we've got coming up next week, because it's major time. So I think in terms of the major preview, this challenger stage is generally pretty clear cut with the teams I think are going to go through in terms of the top teams, and then there's a bunch of other teams who are all at an okay level but could really change around pretty easily. So obviously teams like Vitality should be making it through. I'm liking what I've seen from G2. I think they're solid to make it through as well. I could also see Mouse Sports getting some good points if they could beat some of the teams above them, considering they are still quite a fresh roster. NRG should also be going through. North should probably make it through. They're a little bit more dicey, but I think they're good enough to make it overall. I'm still not 100% convinced by Furia's style, but they've probably got enough to make it through into that top 8 as well. And then I think Crazy showed themselves at the minor to be a solid enough team. Nexa, I think, is one of the most underrated players we have right now. He's playing at an exceptional level against the teams at the European minor, so I expect Crazy to have enough to make it. And then the last spot is maybe a slightly tricky one, because Fours have always looked good online, but they've never been able to play too many LANs. I will say though, the LANs they've played at, they've generally done pretty well. We had PLG Grand Slam back in 2018, they did well at that. Then I got to cast them winning Copenhagen games against other sort of teams ranked similar to them, and then obviously they recently won that CIS minor, so I think Fours are a pretty solid shout. Complexity are another team I'm really interested in seeing because they haven't played an official match for 2 months, and Shazam recently said in an interview that they've been working really hard. He thinks that Def reminds him of Sean Gares in terms of how they work hard as in-game leaders, so if Complexity come out with some anti-strats, they could really cause some upsets, and I could see them rising in the rankings. And then finally, Tyloo is always a team that could cause an upset. Just off of their raw skill alone, I could see them being a real issue for teams like G2 or maybe Furia. If Tyloo show up with quite a few of their players, they could easily cause an upset, and that could gain them a lot of points in the rankings. So we'll see if any of my predictions come through. I'd say watch out for Complexity and Tyloo in terms of the lower ranked teams on the right side of the screen. Those are the 2 teams I could see rising the ranks and causing some upsets, but the rest of those squads I don't see doing a whole lot. I doubt teams like Ints or Dream Eaters or Cyman are really going to make it through, sadly. I'd love to be proved wrong though. The CIS teams have done it before. Let's see if they can do it again. Well, that's going to be us done for this week. Thank you guys for watching. Next week is going to have some good CS again, so we're finally going to get to see what level these teams are at. You are not going to want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.